Welcome back. And now moving on to our first topic for today. Just as we mentioned in the very beginning, something of great interest to all of us when it comes to the communication skills. How we deal with others, how we can deliver the message, how we can because this is something of great importance. Let me say also that this is not only limited to corporate communication skills, but we have also to talk about our personal life, about our children, about our youth, even in the parliamentary elections. This is something of great importance when it comes to our social life in large. Today we have with us Dr. Nesreen Nasr. She is independent management training consultant. First of all, good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, Doctor. First of all, can you tell us about the basics of the communication skills? Because it seems that nowadays we're lacking the communication skills in different fields, maybe between the family, between friends, at work. So we need to know more about the basics that should be applied in the different fields.
Well, good morning. Actually, the topic is very interesting and it touches lots of people. When we talk about achieving success in life, whether it is in the corporate world or in our, as you said, actually in our day-to-day lives,
yes.
The way we deal with others actually impacts the results that we get and where we end up with our success in life to a tremendous level. And actually, to the extent that actually communication became a science. It's called the science of communicology. How do we deliver the message and the way actually in which we deliver it, whether it is at the right time, to the right, with the right degree and to the right people,
yes.
It definitely creates a lot of difference when we talk about results. Actually, research says that something very interesting, that when actually people receive our message, the way they listen to us and the way they form ideas and impressions, the way we actually deliver the message, it sort of impacts the results by 93% versus just 7% to the content of the message.
Yes.
So that shows us to what extent the topic is important.
So this will include the body language, the tone of the voice.
Exactly.
And definitely listening, because we not only lack the communication skills, but we lack listening. No one wants to listen to the other.
Exactly.
This is something, I can never imagine how it is these days.
Actually, listening, according to research, they found out that 70% of our waking moments, whether we like it or not, we listen. And that counts approximately for 45% of the total effort that we do, versus reading, versus speaking, and versus writing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the sort of the striking point is that although listening is the most important skill that we need to apply further, however, people normally, and as parents even, we tend to focus more on making our children learn or acquire the skills of talking and writing, and but really it's not about listening. So as you said, actually listening is one of the essential skills actually when we talk about improving relationships with others in business and in day-to-day life.
I think we can see the listening.
Yes, we can look at the slides.
Yeah.
Actually, if we look at the first slide, the first slide is considered to be sort of a picture, and it contains many faces. So the ability to identify the faces will tell us to what extent we can actually know, like can we sort of observe what are other people's perceptions of themselves, of the others. So as you said, actually listening is one of the essential skills, and when we talk about listening, it's very important because...
So you mean this picture, I can see it in a way that is different from the way Sally will see it, for example?
Exactly, exactly. So it's like everyone looks at it in a different way.
How do you see it?
An old man with a mustache?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, exactly. Some people will just see one face, and some people will see two faces. So it depends how do we look at it. The picture contains actually three pictures. Two men's faces and one woman's face.
I only saw the women.
Okay. It's interesting because the third picture actually is an old person. If you look at it, you will come to realize it. But just through focusing more. And actually the reason that we keep usually this slide when we talk about communication skills, it's one of the interesting exercises that we do. is that...
I want to find out where is the mustache. Because
Okay.
The black.
It's actually there.
Thing.
It's there.
It's the black.
It's just that we sort of, if we can maybe print it on paper, it becomes
Yes.
more easier to
Clear.
observe and see it. Exactly.
So, Dr. Nesreen, sometimes I want to say something which could not be received by the other side. How can I use the communication skills in order to say it in a proper way that can be accepted by the other side, and at the same time, I get what I want from the message delivered?
Okay. One of the important things that is important is actually asking questions. Lots of people, they actually assume certain ideas or maybe certain impressions about behaviors and personalities of others without really sort of validating these perceptions and making sure that it commensurates with the reality. So it's quite important to validate our perception through asking questions and through sort of giving time to listen to the other person's opinions. And by asking questions, and depending, of course, whether we ask open-ended or closed-ended questions, we get a full, clear idea, just exactly like the picture that we saw. So some people, for example, see the young lady, and they sort of cut it short, and they start sort of reacting based on the picture that they had seen without making sure or validating that it is the real picture. So it's quite important to actually validate our perceptions through asking questions and sort of trying to put ourselves in the other person's place.
But even asking questions, there is a way to ask, because sometimes people, they jump to conclusions and ask open questions. Questions that, these questions have no answer, no end. And this is also, I think, we have to, because when it comes to our children, we have to teach them, for example, just listen first. Maybe you can, nothing is wrong with taking some notes in front of you if you are in a meeting or something. Just understand, listen carefully, and then answer the questions, if there were questions raised, for example, and just ask if you want to clarify something. I think we have to do it in a good way.
Exactly. Actually, listening is considered to be one of the most I wouldn't say difficult, but it actually it's a behavior. It's a communication skills related behavior that is not so easy to incorporate for a person who's not used. Because as you mentioned, Ms. Hala, definitely, when you actually listen, there will be always lots of obstacles. And to sort of try to overcome these obstacles, whether they are internal obstacles, like, for example, our certain perception of what the person is saying, or external obstacles, like, for example, it could be noise, it could be some sort of distraction, is not so easy. So it definitely requires practice, it requires persistence, but it's one of the essential behaviors that actually sort of, it makes the other person appreciate us as people, and it goes a long way to create a sort of a close relationships when we talk about, for example, personal relationships or even building trust in corporate relationships. Yes.
And again, do you think that now we're lacking the communication skills because the social networks and the Facebook, the Twitter, and all these things lack the communication, the direct communication between each other?
Well, definitely, when everything is regulated and when it's done in sort of proper context, then it, as you said, well, it becomes perfect. However, if we become addicted to the social media networks or channels, definitely that would overcome really face-to-face interactions. And actually, face-to-face interaction is considered to be quite essential in building human relationships. I mean, I remember even when we do certain research in the corporate world, like for virtual teams who do not really see each other and come in touch on daily basis. Now scientists are trying, researchers, figure out how they can incorporate this human factor of sort of getting in touch with people and putting that human touch. Because the way we actually deliver the message, whether it is through facial expressions, a smile, eye contact, is something that is quite important. We will find people in our lives who deliver powerful messages, but the way the message is being packaged and the way it's being delivered, like, for example, sometimes people might deliver a message, but they would not maintain an eye contact, for example, or they wouldn't say it in a positive way. Or, for example, sometimes people, they look too serious to deliver a message that might sort of need a smiling face. So it's quite important actually to work on practicing these things, and especially if a person is working, for example, in the area of, let's say, public speaking, or in the area of public for service, for example. Yeah.
Talking about us in Egypt, actually, we have many different standards of life. And the problem in Egypt, or the challenge in Egypt, that we have a gap between when it comes to A, B, C, D. And definitely we all are dealing with each other on daily basis. And I believe the way we are communicating when it comes to different cultures, different behavior, sometimes the other side will understand you in a completely wrong way, even if this is not in your intention. Just as you mentioned, for example, talking about members of the parliament, for example. So I believe that we need to understand or how to make it in a simple way. So sometimes I didn't mean it, but maybe I can hurt someone while talking to him, for example. So this is something important, how to let others or all of us to feel that we are all acting as one man.
Yes, actually the point that you mentioned is very interesting, because actually it touches two levels. First level is the when we talk about actually the members who are elected right now for the parliament, and the second level when we talk about the whole population. When we talk about the members actually who are in the process of getting elected, it's quite important actually to possess a high level of communication skills. Why? Because at a point in time they need to influence people and to sort of make them passionate about their vision. And I would assume that when everyone comes to such a position, such a sort of being privileged to handle such responsibilities, it definitely becomes quite important to become influential and to have a vision. So by being patient, by sort of empathizing with people, by asking questions, by making sure they see things from the other person's point of view, it's very important.
Very important.
Empathy is very important. And also the way they deliver a verbal message. Like, for example, I would assume that it's quite important actually to use, for example, simple language while trying to explain complicated matters, whether, for example, it is whether a certain district or a certain area. That's one point. To give as much examples as possible. Sometimes even the pacing or the speed of the conversation or the discussion is quite important on the way it impacts listeners. So this goes at the level of the members of the parliament. When we talk about the general population, one of the important things that I would recommend, and I see that it will create a very big difference in the next few years and months to come, is the idea of proactivity. To what extent is everyone proactive? Like sometimes, for example, we observe that prices, for example, they fluctuate, or maybe something that is not really up to expectations. So we need to convey these things, and we need to convey it in a professional way to the right people through the right channels. So this touches at one point. And the second thing is that, of course, Egypt is considered to be, I mean, we depend on tourism. And we, as you said, actually, it's quite important because we're dealing with people from all over the world. So understanding, for example, the cross-cultural communication, and for example, what is acceptable to me is not acceptable to the other person. Whether, for example, it is the way we talk, for some, let's say, cultures, like, for example, some people, they have the habit of talking loudly, for example, or using their hand gestures quite rapidly. For some cultures or for some people, it's not quite acceptable, or maybe it irritates them. So being sort of observant of these things, being aware of these things, goes a long way to unconsciously establish a good rapport with the other person.
Doctor, again, the communication skills, as you said, is becoming now a science that can be, of course, taught. But the communication skills, they are not acquired